Good morning and welcome to the Courage Coalition. I'm here today with a guest. Mary Fields is somebody that really sparked something interesting in me. She sparked the conversation of grief and trauma and how we move through it. And one of the things I've spoken about in the past is that we get so wrapped up in how we're supposed to do something that we forget to choose to do something. And I hope that this conversation is going to give you permission or allow you to see grief and trauma, maybe in your own life, maybe in someone else's life, maybe someone's really close to you's life in a different way. So, Mary Fields is a mom of four. She's a storyteller and founder of the Mary Assistant, where she helps others share their stories through social media strategy and virtual assistant support. She's also the author of Forever in a Day, a memoir. I don't want to say that word. How do you say that word, Mary?
Memoir.
Memoir, exploring grief, identity, and resilience. And her belief that grief isn't something we move on from, but something we learn to carry while still choosing meaning and change. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm
I'm
excited.
yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation with you too, because grief is such a part of almost anyone's story, right? There's some kind of grief. And I think one of the hardest things that we have to ask ourselves is, do we have a grip on what grief looks for each of us, right? Because I think as a culture, we say that grief is a major loss, a major this, someone dying, someone losing a limb. But I believe, and I don't know if you follow along here or not, that grief can be so individual. And for some people, when they ask you what you're grieving, they're like, well, that's not something to grieve. But we have this thought that grief looks one way.
hmm hmm Yeah. So through all of this trauma and kind of healing myself from it, for myself anyway. So this is just my opinion. And everybody has their own, right? For me, I believe that grief lives in every emotion that we have. So when you are happy because you know what sadness is. Sadness is grief, right? So it lives in every emotion that we have. And everyone is touched by grief. Like you said, it could be a death, it could be the loss of a job, even, right?
Yes.
I mean, and we know, at least I think that you never move through it. Grief is always with you in every stage of your life. And how I come to terms with that is because you could ask somebody who's 95 years old and you say, tell me about your first pet. They're going to tell you about their first pet and they're going to have joy and sadness, and that's grief, right?
Ah,
And so in some ways grief is a gift. It's not a gift that you would want to give to anybody, but it is a gift of knowing that there was happiness and there was joy and there was loss. And you know I think that it's just something that you don't move. I feel like too many, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but I think that there are a few too many like life coaches or therapists that will say, "How do we move through this? Here are the stages. Let's see how you get over." Well, why do you ever want to get over something that once brought you joy or once gave you hope? You don't want to get over it. You just want to learn how to live with those feelings. And I
there,
think, go
there's a
ahead. Yeah.
there's a really powerful quote, and I'm not going to know who it's from, but it says to grieve a loss means that you loved something or someone. And I think about that when you're speaking, because if you have the blessing to grieve something, that means you experience the opposite, because we don't grieve things we don't like, we don't grieve things we don't love, we only grieve things that we have lost, right? Whether that is identities or jobs or whatever. Um, and so the beauty of that, the other side is that we actually got to live that story, love that person, be that person. And so what you're saying is so beautiful. we get stuck in the choice to stay in the hard versus move through. Like you said, it's not about letting go. It's just like, how do I move through this feeling and accept it as part of the actual gift?
Hmm. Right. So a couple of years ago, it's actually been 2 years in January, my dad passed away, and we didn't have a relationship. In fact, I hadn't seen him for 18 years when he passed, but I was his only next of kin, so I had to, manage everything. Well, I actually had a choice. I didn't have to manage it, but I chose to. And doing so helped me with my inner child a lot. And I was in serious grief. And it was kind of twofold. It was me, the adult Mary, grieving for my dad that I never really had. The hope, right? I guess I still hung on to this hope that he was going to one day be the dad that I needed or wanted, and it never happened. But then little Mary was grieving for the dad that she remembered, and the dad that she looked up to at one point, and the dad that she at one time needed. So I think that with grief, you can grieve things that you wish had happened too. Again, like you said, there's still some love in there. Little Mary didn't have her dad, but she loved her dad. And
Yeah.
so I never want to let go of that piece of my dad that meant so much to me at one time, or that I had hoped for.
You hoped. Yeah.
But I do want to learn how to live with that. I don't want it to be so heavy. And so for me, writing my story and kind of taking a deep dive into what grief feels like for me has helped. But obviously, it'll be different for everyone, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that what I love here is that you've taken the power of your story and put it into a conversation, a writing, a memoir that allows others to maybe see a different way. And I think that is really what it means to create impact or to create change is just to share your opinion, and not an opinion from like, this is the way to do it. This is how I did it. This is how I feel. And the the ability, if we were all, I heard this powerful thing is like, you are the missing puzzle piece to somebody's puzzle. But we stay so small because we're like, well, who am I? Who am I to share this? What is it going to do? But your story, and the reason I'm going to this is because you're a storyteller. You actually describe yourself as a storyteller. Your story is literally could be the missing piece to somebody else's puzzle. And one of the things I always say is if you would do it for one, then do it.
Hmm.
So why do you describe yourself as a storyteller? One is my question, but two, I want you to tell us a little bit of your story and how you got to the point of saying I have a choice, and how I move through multiple different places of grief and trauma. I mean, you just described so beautifully to us, your relationship with your father. And I believe what you said is so true, because when I mourned my father, I didn't mourn what he once was. I mourned what I never received, right? Because I
Hmm.
didn't know that version of him that I wanted. I never saw that.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's see. So I think as far as storytelling goes, I have been telling stories for as long as I can remember. I always wanted to be a writer in one way or another. And I used to write stories and poems and things. I used to get in trouble in school because I would write things and hand them off to my friends. And I feel like it was a way for me to get, well, escape. I mean, I had a very traumatic childhood. And so that was a form of escapism for me. But, as I got older, the dream of being a journalist, which is really what I wanted to do, wasn't going to happen. I knew it wasn't going to happen. But then the beautiful thing of social media happened, and you were able to tell the world your story in these little tiny, snippets. And so, I got a blog and I would blog about my life. And mostly at that time, it was, kids and hobbies and stuff. And then as you get older and life changes and you develop more um, stories to tell, some sad, some not, then I just started developing more and more and more. And then my dad died. And it was really the catalyst for me saying it's time for me to really tell my story. And, you know, there we are. It just, here it is. So, yeah.
So as you were writing and processing, because I have to believe that as you're writing this book, you were able to process maybe a part of your story that you hadn't been able to before. And the telling of your story was actually probably a catalyst in helping you heal or accept or move through, however anyone wants to look at that. It's different for each of us. The beginning or the middle, right? The messy middle,
Hmm.
or what it looks like as you're moving forth. But how do you feel like you came to the point of understanding the fact that trauma or healing or grief isn't something that we put a checklist next to? It is more an acceptance.
So, well, we're going to get a little real here. So, and this might be a little hard. So after I wrote my book, two very major things happened, and one is that I started losing feeling in my fingers, and being stubborn, I didn't do anything about it. Long story short, come to find out, I had some severe spinal cord compression, and I needed to have a pretty major surgery. And so I had the surgery. I had to use a walker for a few weeks. I mean, it wasn't a let's fix it and you're back to work. It was let's fix it and you have a very long recovery. I'm still recovering. I'm still going through physical therapy and a lot of things because um, it's not fixed. So, it will be something that I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. So, um, that during that process, my book published, and I wasn't really able to promote it. But a lot of my friends bought it and they were wonderful and supportive. But my book published at the beginning of September, and at the end of September, a very dear friend of mine was unfortunately taken from us. Um, and without getting into details on that, it crushed me. It was here I was already grieving for what I was going through physically, and now I'm grieving for her. And I was scrolling through my phone in a rage over having lost her and was reading through text. I wanted to just keep her alive through these texts. And she had sent me a screenshot, and it was of an excerpt of my book. And I thought, wow, I never thought my own words would come back to me like this. And the excerpt was about grief and how grief is the worst and best thing you will ever have. And to me, it was her speaking to me. It was a message straight from her that this grief is something that you will always have, but as long as you honor it in good ways, in appropriate ways, then it's okay. And so I think that's kind of how I had so many things all at once that I was grieving, and I could have let it just destroy me. Which is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right. Right. When you're in the depths of it, you just want to say, I'm done. But you can't. So, how do we take our grief and use it for good? And I'm still learning myself, but I am finding ways to honor that grief for the body that I used to have, the person I used to be, for my friend who is no longer here, for the memories that she gave me. And I think that that's kind of the catalyst for all of it for me. And it's unfortunate that something so horrific happened. Um, but I think that there was a message in there
Yeah.
for me.
So, what have you found? I mean, if for listeners that are maybe in the depths of that grief, or maybe it's years later after an incident or a loss or anything, and they still can't seem to get out of the darkness. That the wallow of darkness is what I'm going to refer to it as. How do you suggest, coach, help people through what it looks like to do grief personally for them? Right? Because again, we talked about this as what worked for you may not work for the next person, but there is a way, but it is a choice.
Hmm. Yeah. So for myself, probably a little unconventional. And, I was recently, within just a week or two, introduced to somebody who also lost a friend very horrifically. And you never want to meet people that way, right? But I feel like the universe brings you people for a reason. So we met, and one of the things that I said to them that I did when I lost my dad and then when I lost my friend was I made something. And for my dad, it happens to be just a small Tupperware bin that has, things that I found in his residence or things that I had been given when I was a child, and I just keep them in there. And for my friend, I have a shelf that I have little mementos, things that remind me of her. I have some incense up there, and I take time to talk to them.
Mhm.
And some people may say, well, that's not you letting go. And I say, I don't want to let go. And I think that that is really where some of our rage and our darkness comes from, because we have been conditioned to believe that you are supposed to let go. A widower is supposed to get over the loss of her husband, move on, get married, and live another life. No. I say no. I say move on with your life, live a beautiful life, get married, but still honor the person that you once loved, because they were a part of you. They're still
Yeah.
here. They
Yeah.
never leave. So why would we do that to ourselves? Why are we torturing ourselves by saying you have to get over something? So what I say is, don't get over it. Don't, talk to them, think of them, remember the good things, because that is joyful. And so you can't be dark if you're being joyful. And it's also, the reality is they're never coming back, but you can still remember them for who they were, remember what they brought into your life, and turn it, I guess, turn it
Yeah.
into joy and plant some flowers,
Right.
you know.
One of the questions I have is this, because this has been like a part of our story is that we lost my mother-in-law pretty tragically or pretty unexpectedly, and we one of the first things that happened was this feeling or this thought that we shouldn't talk about it because, oh, that just brings up way too much hurt, or maybe dad's going to hurt more, or maybe this, the kids are going to not want to feel this. And I sat with that for a little bit. And one of the things I realized that is that, one, by not talking about the woman that really was a foundational pillar in our life, was a disservice to her.
Hmm.
And for me, that felt so yucky. Like, there's no way this is going to happen. I don't care. And this is harsh on my part, but I don't believe it is, because I don't care what it makes you feel, because that is for you to figure out. But for me, not talking or shying away from a conversation or a memory feels like I am not remembering her, and I will never do that. So for me, I had to start talking about it, and I had to start having conversations about the fact that these conversations need to happen, right? Like not just avoiding that uncomfortable. And, for my husband, and I'm just going to share this without, his opinion here, is that for him, he couldn't talk at first, and he's still going because it was so painful. Um, it was just so painful and dark for him. And as time has gone, he has gotten more and more comfortable with those discussions. But what it did is it gave my children permission to remember and talk about her, this wonderful woman that was a pillar in their life.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed my youngest to remember someone that she didn't have very many memories of, right? Because she was so young when she passed. It allowed my grandchildren, or it allows my grandchildren, to remember someone that they didn't get to know, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not a part of their story, but it is a part of their legacy. It is a part of their right to remember someone that they didn't get to be a part of. And I really want people to think about that for a second, because you say speak to them, which is great. And I do speak to my mother-in-law on a regular basis on my walks, but I speak about her.
Mm-hmm.
I remember her through words, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they bring up emotion, right? Because again, like you said, we celebrate the hard because of what we receive, the love, the joy, the kindness, all of those things. For us, hummingbirds are a big part of our memory of her. One, she loved them, but the visit that they've given us ever since her death. And so now you'll start seeing hummingbirds everywhere. Like you said, you have a shelf, but we have hummingbirds, whether
Mm-hmm.
they're tattoos, whether they're other things, we have hummingbirds. And so I'm going to encourage listeners to ask yourself, are you avoiding to hurt somebody else, which in turn might be hurting you, or not allowing you to move through that emotion, that feeling, that need to remember?
Yeah, I would expound on that even to the extent of, if you don't talk about a person. So, for instance, my dad, who he did not die peacefully. It was tragic. Um, and I feel like you can get stuck, right? So we're stuck. I know how my dad died, but I didn't know a lot about him, through most of my life. And so I made it my mission to kind of learn about who this person was and talk about him and find out these amazing, fascinating things about my dad that I just wanted everybody to know. Like, look who he was. He was so much more than how he died.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we don't talk about people once they've gone, they're stuck. The last thing we remember is how they died or when they died. And like you said, it is such a disservice. It's a disservice to them and to their memory. And it's a disservice to you and to your heart. Let's remember them for who they were rather than what happened to them. And so I think that's important too, to try and keep in mind. And maybe that's where some of the darkness comes from, is because we're refusing to talk about them. We're so stuck on what happened to them and how they left us that um that's sad.
Right.
So let's not focus on that.
And I think also, not to just like make this all roses and rainbows, is that even if you've lost somebody, or if you're grieving something that you didn't know, and it's not about everything you could remember that's positive. I truly believe that when we remember all of it, that it doesn't matter what it was, and I'm sitting here thinking about my dad, is that I didn't hide anything. I didn't scoop anything under the carpet, not to necessarily celebrate what he was or was not, but to give myself permission to feel it, to and when I say accept, I want you to take that with a grain of salt, because when I say accept, what I want you to hear me say is that I saw him for maybe the trauma that he went through. right?
Yes.
I was able to go back and say, you know what? I am so sad that his childhood was like this. It's not an excuse, but it is a part of his story. And a part of his story is why he was what he was or wasn't, right? Like it is a part of the story. And I can sit there and say, you know what, Dad, I forgive you. I forgive you for everything you weren't, everything that you were. And you know what else? I see you. I see you for the past that was probably harder than anything I can think of, right? That gives us permission, I feel, to feel it, to move
Mhm.
through it. For me, I like to say move through it because I'm moving through what our culture or our society says we should celebrate or not celebrate. I'm moving through into what it looks like for me. And by doing that, leaving an example for my children, for my husband, for my community, whatever, what it looks like for grief in my story. And and that gives somebody else permission because like I said at the beginning, Mary's story is a puzzle piece to somebody else's puzzle. She may never meet that person, but it very well could be that missing piece.
Mhm. So I like to call it dancing with grief.
Oh, I love that.
And in fact, I'm actually working, I have mostly finished a quote unquote workbook called Dancing with Grief and learning how to recognize where those feelings are. And I think that there is absolutely 100% a place for rage because when my dad died and my friend died, I raged. I raged. And as you mentioned with your dad, I was able to understand why my dad did some of the things that he did. He was still a horrible father. He made horrible choices. But I was able to go back and see what happened to him, why he made the choices that he made. And I too was able to forgive him. I have not been able to forgive everyone. And, that may be another podcast because I have a unique view of forgiveness. But for my dad, at least, I was able to come to terms with, I guess, and forgive him and make peace with, you know, who he was and who he wasn't. So,
Well, I love that you bring up peace because I think that that's still such a misperceived feeling because the quotes, the sayings are all there. Your grudge, your anger, your rage towards somebody else does nothing but harm you. And like you said, it's important to feel rage. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. But I do challenge people to ask, the rage or the grudge you're holding inside, is it affecting anybody but you? Are you truly creating a punishment for that person that did you harm? Or are you creating a punishment for yourself? Because, like you said, our forgiveness is always going to be different. What does forgiveness look like for each of us, right? And what we have to ask ourselves is, but what does it look like for us? What is
mhm,
that level of peace? Is grudge holding or lack of forgiveness something that you were taught and you're just holding on to it because you believe it's your truth? Or is it truly creating peace in you? Because I know as we get older in life, that definition of peace is going to be different. And one of the things I always say is that if tonight when I lay my head down, it is the last time I take breath, do I feel peaceful
mhm,
about relationships, life, situations, conversations? Do I feel peaceful? And I don't think some people that hold grudges to something that happened, and I say grudge because that's just the conversation that I've had throughout my life, is that I feel like my mom was a grudge holder and she learned that from her mother, right? And
mhm,
so I always said growing up, I am not going to hold grudges. Before I go to bed each night, I'm having the conversation, right? There's no grudge holding. And forgiveness can look so different for each of us, right? Maybe my level of forgiveness is that the situation that happened with my mom is talked about and pulled through and da 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 da, and now we can just move forth with grace and harmony, right? But maybe for my sister it doesn't look like that, right? And her level of forgiveness or her repair of a relationship looks completely different. But does it provide her peace? But I think we have to ask ourselves some tough questions around what peace means to us,
Hmm.
right? Because we're saying, I'm peaceful, I'm fine, I'm over it. Are you? Right?
Hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I think that well, okay, so a couple of things. One, with grief, I try to view grief, and I've talked about this with other people, is that if you recognize the grief in yourself and those feelings that you have in yourself, then you can recognize grief in other people too.
Yes.
Because we are all affected by grief and we all deal with grief in different ways. So let's say the person that you at your, I don't know, at your workplace, they are just a complete jerk all the time. I mean, chances are that somebody who is that angry and that upset is dealing with some grief, some trauma, some unspoken trauma that they aren't dealing with. So if you can give yourself some grace, then you can give other people grace,
Yeah.
right? Now, that doesn't mean that you give them a free pass, but you can at least give them some grace.
Right.
And I think that can also play like with my dad. I was able to give him grace. Now, my mother is a different story. I have been able to give my mother grace. I understand she was very young. She too made horrible choices. The difference is she continued to make those choices over and over and over and over again. And even up until about, well, when my dad died, it was, when are you going to love me unconditionally? Despite the fact that she beat me, abandoned me, starved me, force fed me, and despite all of those things, has not yet once said, I'm sorry, I did it. She blamed me. She even denied it ever happening. And even 2 years ago, when my dad died, rather than reaching out with grace and kindness and being like, I'm so sorry this happened to you, it was, when are you going to love me unconditionally? You only have one parent now, one parent that I have not seen since I was 12.
Mm,
So the grace that I have given her goes about this far.
yeah.
And I have not yet been able to forgive her. And I think that is because there's no accountability.
Right.
There's no, um, it's really hard to forgive somebody who wants to continually abuse you.
Yeah.
And I feel like if she were back in my life, that's exactly what, I mean, she's doing it and she's not even in my life.
Yeah.
How wild is that? So,
The boundaries of grace, the boundaries of forgiveness is what I love that you've brought this up, because that's exactly what I'm speaking of, is that we each will have forgiveness in a different way. And what how I forgive isn't going to be how someone else forgives. And those boundaries are so critical because they're a part of your story, your experience, right? Again, two siblings can have the exact same experience, but what they take from it is completely different in their brains and their bodies. And so the boundaries may look completely different. That's not right or wrong. Just because someone you love does it one way doesn't mean that someone you love, that the other person should do it exactly like you've done it, right? And I feel like that's one of the things I get so frustrated with is that your way is not my way. And the story you have with your parents is not the story that Mary has with her parents, right? You maybe you had abuse, or maybe you had a lack, but you didn't get abandoned. You didn't get force fed like Mary did. So we have to be able to understand that there is so much grace in
mhm,
how we see other people's stories, other people's forgiveness, trauma, um, grief, right? Because you're grieving a parent that was not there but wants to be there, right? Like how dare you? How dare you say that you deserve my unconditional love, right? So I'm excited to talk a little bit about this workbook and like the reason you created it, which I think we can see, but the why behind knowing that it needed to be a tool to have others, to be able to work through and receive, and also like where people can find it and what you hope for it.
So, I mean, you can't find it anywhere yet because it's not done. It's written. I have a friend who is going to do the illustration for it. It really is truly in memory of our friend that we lost. And so it may take a while, but that doesn't mean I don't talk about grief. And so, like all of my social platforms, I still talk about grief. And so many of those things will be in the workbook. But the reason that I wanted to do it is because I feel like we all search for meaning.
Mm,
We all need an outlet. And in grief, even if you are grieving something that happened, 10 years ago, I feel like, at least for me, this was such a process in losing my friend. Although I kind of hate the term losing because I didn't lose her, right? I didn't lose her. But she's no longer here on this earthly plane. I needed something. What can I do? Right now I'm raging. What do I do in this moment? And I wanted people to know, okay, you feel rage, feel it, own it, name it. What can I do when I'm feeling sad? And sometimes, so like I say, write your feeling on a piece of paper, fold it up and put it somewhere where you can see it. And there it is. There's that rage. That rage is right there. And if you need it, you grab it, you put it in your pocket, you carry it with you. It's always there, but move on with your day, right? There's little like rituals that you can do, light some incense, say their name, go outside, scream their name, like whatever makes, works for you in that moment. My neighbors probably think I'm insane. I mean, really, they're like, her cat's name is really weird, or, you know, but I think for me, really, for me, the reason that the workbook was written was not for anyone else. It was really for me. And then I thought, wow, I probably should just put it out there and see if people will like it. I don't know. They may hate it, but it was really for me. And hopefully it will be out. We don't know.
true.
We're just gonna take our time, but I'll let you know.
Yeah. No grip, right? And if I point people to your socials, I know you'll be all over social talking about it. So
Yes.
one of the things I ask every guest, Mary, is what does courage look like for you, or what does it mean for you? And what you said is that to me, courage is being afraid and doing it anyways. Sorry, a bird just hit my window.
Oh, oh, wow.
um, but
There's
being
probably some meaning in that somewhere.
doing it anyways. And I think that we get stuck in the unknown, right? We get stuck in what it looks like on the other side of the rage or the fear or the sadness. And what if we just say, huh, I'm really curious about what is on the other side of this? The choice, right? The choice. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, in very simplistic terms, courage can be as simple as getting up in the morning for
Yes.
some people.
Yes.
And I would say that, it took some courage for me on days to just get up and keep going. I think that we are all courageous in our own ways. And I do think that we probably should give ourselves a little more credit for that too. And I don't see courage as this big giant thing. Oh, you're a lion. I think the mouse can be courageous as well. And I think it, right. I mean, I just saw a mouse the other day when I was driving down the road. I was going to a stop sign and I thought I saw a leaf. And no, it was just this little teeny tiny mouse crossing the road. And I waited because I wanted it to make it safely. And I thought, wow, that's
That's a
a very
courageous thing.
courageous mouse. But I also think that too many times we allow the unknown, and what is the unknown stop us from doing something. 9 times out of 10, we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
No, probably more than that,
Probably more
actually.
than that. I'm going to agree with
Probably more
you.
than that.
Yeah.
And so, what do you have to lose?
Right. For me, like when I say, what do you have to lose? I actually say, what do you have to gain?
Yes, yeah.
Right? What do you have to gain? Think about that, because what you have to gain is usually so much bigger than what you
Mm-hmm.
have to lose.
True. And I love that. I love that. And I love that flip of it. Instead of it sounding negative, let's make it sound positive. I love
Yeah.
that. That's great.
Because the version of you on the other side of that decision is someone you've never met.
Mhm.
And I'm going to tell you guys that you're going to be really amazed at how cool that version of you is, right? Like how cool
Mhm.
that person is, how fun, how brave, how smart, all the things. On the other side of that belief that it's too scary, it's too risky, it's too dangerous, whatever it is,
Mhm.
there is somebody else on the other side of that. And no one in this world gets out of this lifetime without falling face first sometimes. But that's part of the journey, right? That's a part of the story. That's a part of what it means. The owner of Amazon always says, I want to fail faster. That's their right. Like, let's get used to failing faster and celebrate that, because that means we are evolving. We are choosing those hard things. Even like Mary said, it's like getting out of bed. You can fail because you can get out of bed and go to the bathroom and go out in the living room and just know that without a choice, you've got to go back. That's not a failure.
Mhm.
I have high school kiddos and their friends always say, did you fail or did you learn something about yourself? And they're like, oh, huh, right? The simplest
Mhm.
things. Is it a failure? Was it a mistake? Or did you just learn something really cool about yourself?
Right.
Right. So for anyone listening, I'm going to drop Mary's a social here on podcast notes. And just thank you for being here. Thank you for talking about a subject that really we need to start talking more about. We need to have conversations about what it feels like to grieve for each of us individually. So I cannot thank you enough for being here.
Thank you for having me. I enjoy talking about it.
Yeah,
As yucky as it can be,
it's
I
important.
like talking about it. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
So, listeners, remember, if something about this really hit you, share it. You never know who's looking for that same message. Download and leave us a review. And as always, remember, love you, mean it.